All right, welcome everyone to the Liberty Show for today. And on the show today, we are going to be discussing things that deals with the economy. We're going to be interviewing Mr. Bruce Koerber. I don't know if I mentioned the name correctly. Permit me for that. So we're going to be interviewing him about his book, More Than Laissez-faire. But a small little thing about Mr. Bruce, I would love to read out a small thing about him. He's an economist in the classical liberalism tradition. He is technically trained in Austrian economics, and his specialty is in defined economic theory, which he has used plus his training to discover the deductive application of these in economics, in ethics, and also in justice. Welcome, Mr. Bruce, to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, maybe we can raise your voice a bit more so that we can actually hear you well.
Louder. Thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Bruce, your work so far, I was reading your about on your website, and I saw some things that are intriguing. You mentioned that you've been in the economics industry, you've been in forestry before.
Right.
Someone advised you to actually study economics. You study economics, and something somewhere just happened. You dreamt of something and you brought it out. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, first of all, I wanted to tell you that my last name is pronounced Koerber. And the reason,
okay.
Koerber, like Gerber baby food, Koerber. And the reason I say that is because I know like Bioni's name and his last name Fosobi and your name, I'm completely empathetic to not being able to pronounce my name correctly when you look at it, because I think I'll struggle with any of these African names. They're all very beautiful, but I've never heard them before and I don't know how to pronounce them. So I wanted to say that. Anyways, what happened with me, I was studying forestry at Auburn University, and I went to a luncheon. I sat next to a professor who was had done work in Tanzania, and I was interested in working in international forestry. So we struck up a conversation. We were talking, and he was looking for a graduate student, and I was just kind of finishing up my degree in horticulture. So we linked up, and I became a graduate student under him. And it had been several years since I had studied economics. So I had to take some the basic economics classes. And my first instructor, it's a random thing. You sign up for a class and you could get any instructor. There were numerous instructors that I could have gotten, but I got an instructor whose name was Roger Garrison. And the thing that's interesting about Roger Garrison, he's an Austrian economist. And what had happened is Auburn University, 2 years prior to that, had been chosen as the world center for Austrian economics. And what that meant really was establishing the Ludwig von Mises Institute. They were looking for a home for that institute. And one of the board of regents at Auburn was a fan of Ludwig von Mises. So he was influential in bringing that to Auburn. So when it moved to Auburn, then some professors in the field that were Austrians migrated to Auburn University. And so it turns out Dr. Roger Garrison was one of those Austrian economists, and he was the first economics teacher that I had at Auburn. And I learned from him Austrian economics, and I learned about the Ludwig von Mises Institute, and then I became involved in that. And so that's where I basically learned about classical liberalism, about Austrian economics. And then you made reference to a dream. Well, so that was in 1985, 86. And then I had done, you know, other various things, but you mentioned, you know, earlier before the program started, we were talking, Leon, and you were talking about how you had a passion for using the media to reach people. And what happened, one of the things that happened for me is when I learned about Austrian economics, that became a dominating passion in my life. So even when I left Auburn, I was always reading and learning and you know, I was actively connected to all the things that were going on with the Ludwig von Mises Institute. So for another 20 years, because from 1985, 86 to 2004 is when I had the dream. But in that interim period, I was an avid, passionate Austrian economist in my interests. And so then one night in 2004, I had a dream and an image appeared to me. And that's what began the divine economy theory, because when I saw the image, I wrote it down in the middle of the night because I always forget my dreams. But when I woke up in the morning and I saw it, I knew it was significant. And so then I just start using my technical training as a Austrian economist to unfold that model. And that's what basically the divine economy theory is connected to, that image that appeared to me in a dream. That's
all right. Thank you very much for that. Now, under the conceptual model inside your book, you made mention of it that as we humans are made up of systems, organs, tissues, and cells, so is the economy, especially divine economy as it was, be as it were. So, can you shed some light on that?
Well, you know, I think a lot of time the one way when people look at the economics as an empirical science, economics is almost seen as mechanical. You know, it's like an engineering project, social engineering and all that gets involved. But really, and the perspective that you get from classical liberalism and in the divine economy theory is, it's not mechanical, it's organic. And so the imagery that I use in the book, More Than Laissez-faire, is showing how it really is an organic thing. And it has that nature to it. And that's more connected to us as humans, you know. But here's the thing, you know, we're organic. So, I mean, that we can relate to it in that sense. But here's the other thing, we're also spiritual. So that's the other aspect that is brought in, that the mechanical, empirical economics, you know, just never even gets close to coming to that. Whereas the divine economy theory takes us in a new direction where it shows that it's organic and that human beings have a spiritual nature.
All right, thank you very much. Now, under the anatomy of the defined economy, you said that defined economy can actually have four segments, and that is transformation, law, order, and human spirit. Can you shed more light on that so that our audience can actually understand the four cardinal points of defined economy?
Yeah, well, that was the image. I mean, I never really thought of in those terms prior to the dream. But the dream that I had was like a flower, a four-petaled flower, and the center was called divine economy. And then the four petals on it, one petal, and I mean, it was in my dream. I didn't label them. I just wrote it down, and then I developed it. But in the image in the dream, the center of that four-petaled flower was divine economy. Then on the lower, so if it's like a north, south, east, west petals. So on the south petal was human spirit was down there. And then directly north of that, of the center, was transformation. And then the West and the East, the West side was law and the East side was order. So that's what appeared in the dream. But when I saw that in the morning, when I woke up and I looked at that, I knew that that was, that there was nothing incompatible with classical liberalism and economics from that viewpoint with that layout of, and so then I started to develop it. And so what I said, instead of the pedals, then I put lines between them, and then because the line, so there was a line between human spirit and divine economy, and then between divine economy and transformation. Well, those lines to me should have been double-sided arrows because they were interactive. So then I transformed it from lines to double-sided arrows, showing the interaction and the dynamic aspect of the flow from the divine economy to human spirit to divine economy to transformation to law to order. So all those things were dynamic, and that then basically was like the first step in continuing to develop that model. And so so the point that I want to make here, and maybe I could just show a picture of that on my screen share. Okay, so I'm going to go to that, which is right here. So let me see if I can get there. Oh, there it is. Okay, so this was the, where is it? Okay, so there's the original image that I saw, and there's the 4 petals and the center, and I called that the anatomy of the divine economy. So we're talking about this organic nature. And then what I did is I drew these lines between them and put double-sided because it's, there's this dynamic aspect to it. So then I called that the skeletal structure. So again, you see in this organic, there's the anatomy, there's the skeleton, and then I just keep adding to that. And I'll leave this screen share now just in case you had any comments on that. Let's see, how do I get to that? How do I get to the screen share?
Okay, great. So when you get to the 4th dimension, it increases from 4 cardinal points to 6 cardinal points, in which you put justice and unity into it. How does those two get connected into it?
Wait, could you wait 1 second till I figure out how to get out of this thing? How do I get back to where I'm going? Get rid of the screen share. Oh, up here. I see. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Under the 4th dimension, you added justice and unity plus transformation, law, order, and human spirit, making it the 6th cardinal point. So how do you explain those two?
Okay, so again, what happened is I continued to develop that model, and the justice and unity axis. Okay, so when you look at that diagram or that model, the way I showed it with the skeletal structure, it's just basically like a 2-dimensional quadrant. I mean, a model with 2 axes, axis going horizontal and an axis going vertical, and so that's like a 2-dimensional model. And then I started to add new components to it. Like I took that model. And again, as an Austrian economist, the driving force of the economy is entrepreneurship. That's what Austrians understand. And so we're jumping a little ahead because some of the other principles that Austrians understand go before that. So I'm gonna do a screen share again. Apologize. I'm gonna backtrack and I'll get to what you're talking about. So what happened here is then I started adding economic components. Again, I'm an Austrian economist. So when that skeletal structure, I then described how the economy operates. And so within that skeletal structure, I added things like here, the connecting point between human spirit and divine economy is purposeful action. So action is there. The connecting point between the divine economy and order is the market. The connecting point between transformation and the divine economy is the capital structure. And the connecting point, these are the economic components. These are the they're potencies, intermediate potencies that are between these elements. So the connecting point between the divine economy and law were property rights. So again, that's how the economy operates. So what I did then though, but I knew that the driving force in the economy is entrepreneurship. So I took that model and I dunked it. I pushed it into a bucket of water or an ocean or whatever you want to put it. It's submerged inside something now. And what surrounds it then is entrepreneurship, either latent or active entrepreneurship. And that's now a third dimension, because prior to that, it's just a two-dimensional figure. But you would push it into this water and that is submerged in entrepreneurship, that's a three-dimensional model. And so then where we got, what the question you asked was about the fourth dimension. And that's this here. The fourth dimension was this justice and unity axis. See, so on a traditional three-dimensional model, you have your horizontal line, you have your vertical line, and then you have a line going through the center, going like right to you, right towards you or right away from you. And that's this justice unity axis. But before I got to that, I already added a third dimension, which was submerging it in the water of entrepreneurship. But this is now the fourth dimension, this justice unity axis. And what it really is the really interesting thing about it is, it's like if the planet Earth, it has an axis that it spins around, okay? And that's what this axis is. This is the axis that the divine economy is spinning around. And it's spinning around at whatever speed it's allowed to, depending on how free it is. And we're talking about liberty. You know, if we live in a world of liberty, then there's nothing impeding the speed of that rotation. And what that speed of that rotation represents is the nature and role of knowledge. So knowledge can pass along throughout the economy fastest in this most effective way when it's not interfered with. Okay, and so that's why liberty is so important, because you can't have unity and justice if you have things in there interfering with the flow of knowledge. So that's the fifth dimension of this model, okay, or the fourth dimension. Fourth dimension, is that fourth or fifth? Oh, it's a fourth dimension of the model. And then the next dimension, as I took it across time. So then that same model moving over time is the next dimension. And so that's the fifth dimension. So it's a 5-dimensional model. And I think I know how to get out of here. Let me see if I can do that. Yes. Yeah, okay.
So,
I don't know. I hope I didn't confuse anybody.
No. I don't think you do. The faces of the people here doesn't show that you confuse anybody what you said. Okay, now let me ask this. Under the Fifth Amendment, there is actually a question that is written there, and I would like to ask that.
Okay.
It says, explain how all of the elements in the defined economic model are affected by the equilibrium forces.
By the what forces?
Equilibrium.
Oh, okay, equilibrium forces. Okay. Well, you know, first of all, I want to talk about the equilibrium forces. You know, the economy is never in equilibrium. That's contrary to what empirical economics talks about, because all their models are trying to assume that we're in equilibrium, and then they put equations in based on that. It's never in equilibrium. because humans are subjective. There's no, they change their minds. There's no way it can ever be. But there's a power. There's a power. It's the power which we can't understand that is driving everything. Why does supply and demand work? Because of equilibrium forces. That's the power behind the economy, is equilibrium. But so we're always moving towards equilibrium, but we're always in disequilibrium. But because the equilibrium forces is always moving us in certain directions, everything that's in the economy is affected by it. And plus everything in the economy affects equilibrium. So like for instance, I'm going to go back to that last screen share again. So this was the example. Okay, so over time, see, what's happening is this divine economy at this first time is not the same as the one at the second time. And the reason is because this first one was in a state of disequilibrium, but the second one is at a state of a different state of disequilibrium. And it's moved according to how things have changed as a result of all the things that are happening. Someone taking action, certain capital structure being in place, property rights either developing or being impeded, the market either working or being interfered with, entrepreneurs, whether they're latent or active, all these things are happening, and the flow of knowledge is knowledge flowing. So like for instance, you would assume, like looking at this picture, you're assuming, okay, the one on the left is time one and the one on the right is time one. Well, in an ever advancing economy, which is what we're is the providence, the gift to us is that we will have an ever advancing economy as long as we don't corrupt it and interfere with it. So in an ever advancing economy, it's always moving forward. It's moving to the right and it's getting better as it moves along. Well, you could look at it in the opposite way. If you're over there on the right and somebody's interfering with it, it's going to regress. So it's going to push it in the wrong direction, and it's going to get smaller and it's distorted, but it never can be destroyed. That's the thing. It never can be destroyed because the equilibrium power is beyond human comprehension and beyond the ability for humans to squash it completely. They can mess with it, but as soon as they stop messing with it, it takes over again and it pushes us forward. So that's the beauty of liberty, is that the liberty movement is what is going to free us from those things that are keeping us from reaching our potential.
Thank you very much for that. Okay. Now, on chapter 3 of your book, it talks about production possibility frontier.
Yeah.
I think Glenn will much appreciate that side, because he loves anything that comes with economics and all this free market stuff. We're talking about some models in the branch of divine economic model. I want to ask this question. You mentioned the meaning of TO, T1, and T2. Okay, now, describing the meaning of the frontiers, T1, T0, T1, and T2, in the standard production possibility frontier, and also in the divine economic frontier. I think you need to show the diagram 3P, okay, so that people can actually understand that. So how do you compare those two in terms of limited resources?
In terms of what?
Limited resources.
Limited resources. Oh, okay. Well, I'll go to the diagram in a second. I want to talk about the production possibilities frontier. So it's a technique that's used in economics, and there's pretty much mostly just a standard production possibilities frontier. It's like bread or butter. Where are the resources going? Are they going to go towards producing bread, a piece? Are they going to be used towards producing guns or butter. Is that what I said? Anyways, so like in a war-like economy, it's a choice. You either make bread or you make guns, you know, and so they're basically aggregates, and so you have, because they use the same inputs, you have to choose between one or the other, which I'll take you to a diagram here, and let's see if I can get to that. So that's going to be down. Okay, so here we go. So here's so the standard one, the standard production possibilities frontier is capital goods versus consumer goods. So you have to pick one or the other. You know, if you're either going to put all your resources into something you can consume right away, or into goods that will produce things that you consume later. So that's the traditional consumer standard production possibilities frontier. And what happens though on that is every time you have let me see if I went too far. Okay, yeah, here it is. Okay, so here it is. Okay, so there it is. You have consumption versus investment, and at some point the economy doesn't grow. When you're making a choice between these inputs, and the economy is going to just stay exactly the way it is because of the way you're choosing to distribute these aggregates. I mean, these inputs towards a certain aggregate, consumption or investment. At that point on that line, that means the economy is not going to grow. So when you're at that point where that circle is, you're in a no growth point, and the economy is stationary. But if you move to the point where you're consuming more than investing, your economy is going to shrink over time, because you don't have any production going on. You're just consuming, or in a relative sense, relative to the no growth. So what's happening is your economy over time is going to be smaller. See, that's what these lines are: T0, T1, T2. Your economy is contracting. Versus if you're putting your resources into investment in capital goods, then you're investing into production, and so that's going to cause the economy to grow. So that's where that goes there. See, over time, the economy is getting larger when you do that. So, but what's happened in economics, and that basically is as far as it goes. I mean, there's little tweaks and stuff, but the divine economy theory goes into much more detail on production possibilities frontiers, because it looks at what are the aggregates for anything. Like, for instance, this human spirit. We talked about what's the connecting point between the human spirit and the divine economy is purposeful action. So the aggregate on that is action and inaction. And so it then basically looks at what would cause inaction to be the dominant thing in the economy versus action. So it basically looks at it at aggregates in new ways, and I think your readers will find it interesting if they get into this chapter to see how to reassess how you can use that tool to understand the economy. So I'm going to jump ahead real quick here all the way to the very end of this chapter, because you asked about it. Okay, so that's this picture here. So anyways, if you're looking at this, you can tell it's just a quadrant. I mean, it's one quadrant. It's a vertical line in one direction and a horizontal line in another direction. So if you were looking at a circle, you're only looking at 1/4 of the circle. So when you see these movements, whether it's contracting or expanding, these lines here going T0, T1 to T2, you see what it kind of looks like, but you're only looking at a quadrant. So the divine economy theory quadrants, the divine economy sphere frontiers shows you the bigger picture, which is economics. The tendency in economics is to dissect everything to the minutest degree, and then it becomes unrealistic. It's like, you're looking at something that, that it's like ceteris paribus, it doesn't really you don't really see how it affects everything. Whereas the divine economy sphere frontier shows you that it's not a quadrant thing. When you have like here, this shows a planned order versus a spontaneous order. Those are the aggregates that I put on this production possibilities frontier. Those are the two aggregates, and here's the no growth point. But if you move towards interventionism, a planned order instead of a spontaneous order, we're talking about liberty, which is a spontaneous order. When you have interventionism, you have a planned order. People trying to pretend that they understand what everybody wants, and then they impose it on people. That's this interventionism. And when that happens, look what it does to the economy. It causes it to contract. But it doesn't cause it to just contract in this little way that you can get satisfaction because you've made this little diagram. What it does, it causes the whole economy to contract. So then it's not just this little quadrant that's being affected. This one's looking at a positive thing, going from TO to T1 to T2, that it's growing. We have an ever advancing civilization. So what's happening is when you have an environment that's a positive environment, that little line there is there at first, but at T2, look where it is. It's way over here. And at T1, it's there, and at T2, it's right here. So it's growing just like we saw with the production possibilities frontier, but it's not growing only there. It's growing on all these quadrants and all the time. So, I mean, that's where this equilibrium forces are. It spreads throughout the economy. It's not localized to one little activity that the person is doing. So that's the unique thing, I think, about the divine economy theory with regards to production possibilities frontiers. It identifies new aggregates and shows you what happens when you have unfavorable conditions for that aggregate or favorable conditions for that aggregate. And then in addition to that, it shows you that it's not just that little area, it's affecting the whole economy. So that's an interesting part for that chapter.
All right, thank you very much, Bruce, for that. Okay, now moving on to the next one.
Okay.
We're talking about the human spirit and other quadrants. Can you hear me? Okay, you picked 8 economic principles and you place them into the quadrant, which include price theory, marginal utility, imperfect knowledge, profit and loss, economic calculation, prices of high order good, utility of labor, and competitive theory, right?
Right.
Okay, so now, why did you pick these 8 principles and put it in the quadrant of human spirit?
Okay. Well, I'm going to go to a diagram real quick to show you something. Let me see where it is here. Okay, right there. Then go here and there. Okay. So again, the model is broken in a way, is broken into quadrants because, and the quadrants are defined by the elements at the end of each vector. Okay, so you got order, law, transformation, and human spirit. And then, so if you were going to look at a quadrant there, you have a quadrant like an order transformation quadrant, human spirit order quadrant. So each one of those quadrants. And so what I did, and it's arbitrary. If you were a divine economy theorist and you were wanting to use this theory in your own understanding of economics, you could identify things differently than I did. What I did is I went through the literature and I found the economic concepts and principles that are in the literature, all as many as I could find. I may have missed some, I don't know. I'm pretty thorough. Anyways, I went through and I listed them all out in my mind in front of me, and I thought, what characteristics do these concepts have? Where would they fit in this model? Which quadrant is most like, what qualities do those concepts have that would tell me where they belong? So that's all I did. So the 8 principles and concepts that are in that quadrant you're talking about, Leon, I arbitrarily chose those because of I thought they had characteristics that were represented by that quadrant, and then I placed them in there, and then I just went by each of I just talked about each of those economic concepts. Most of the time, well, I'm an Austrian economist. I'm a classical liberal economist in a classical liberalism tradition. So when I defined those concepts, I defined it in those terms, not in the term. So there may be a little bit of variation as how I defined them compared to what a person who maybe just studied empirical economics would consider. Because like or say a Marxist, a Marxist who doesn't think capital is of any importance in the economy, of course they wouldn't want to place capital anywhere in this model, So, but where I'm looking for true economic concepts and principles. Once I found them, I put them in there and then I described them. But the interesting thing about it is, what happens then when you take a step back and look at this at that point, there's so many interesting benefits from this that you don't see in contemporary economics. Is you don't see principles relative to one another. You learn a principle, and then you move on, you learn another principle, then you learn another principle. Whereas this model helps you see, okay, you see them relative to each other in the quadrant. That's really interesting, because they all have similar. The only reason they're in that quadrant is because they have some similarities to them. Okay, so that's interesting that they're relative to that. Well, then you see, okay, you can also see it. Well, it's relative to these principles that are in a different quadrant. How are those? What's the relativity between them? And then you step back and see, how's it relative to the whole model? And so it adds so much depth in the ability to understand what the concepts really represent, because you're looking at it relative to everything else rather than just memorizing the definition.
All right. Thank you very much for that. There is a question that I'm still missing in my head. Okay. Can you give us a real-world example for one of the specific principles in the human quadrant and the other quadrant? Like a real-life example.
Of which one? Which quadrant?
Human spirit and other quadrant.
Oh, okay. Well, the one I used, I think, in the book was, let me take a look. That's this one here. Okay, so at the very end of this. Was it human spirit order? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, human spirit order.
Okay, so the disutility of labor is the one that I used in here. And so, let me see. So I'll back up, or I'll come back to here. Okay, so okay, I think let me possibilities frontier on that. So one of the things I did is I described how it fit into the quadrant. And then I use an example here of, so this would be a real world example. So this is disutility of labor. So it's a praxeological fact and law that humans prefer not to do labor. I mean, if I have a choice between doing something difficult or not, or being at ease, I'm going to choose ease. All human beings do that. Now, that doesn't mean that a person can't have like special goals. Like, why would a person climb a mountain if they didn't have to? Well, they're doing it because they enjoy it, or they have a personal goal on it. They don't mind struggling because they're achieving their goal. So you say, well, that's not showing disutility of labor. Well, it is. They're making a choice, a conscious choice, but they wouldn't at the same time, they wouldn't in their everyday life, they're not going to do things that are difficult instead of easy. That's just a personal choice for a personal goal. But as far as humans, how they operate, the operating mode of humans is they always choose, they have a disutility of labor. So what happens though, when if you have if disutility of labor is rewarded, then that's what this production possibilities frontier shows. And this is kind of a way to understand why welfare economics is disruptive to civilization, because if we already know that humans don't want to do labor, so if you then reward that, you're going to get more of it. And if you get more of it, what the opposite of when you have disutility of labor, you have less productivity. I mean, if you're not producing, if you're avoiding doing labor, putting effort into something, then you're being unproductive, and so as a result, productivity decreases. And when productivity decreases, then the economy declines. And the difference is if you're choosing to be productive, even though there's a disutility of labor, but you're choosing that you'd rather be productive than unproductive, then what happens is production takes place, and then the economy expands. So that was one example in that quadrant. One of the economic concepts in that quadrant of human spirit and order is this economic concept called disutility of labor, and so the example there is that disutility of labor is unavoidable. I mean, it's just the reality of the way humans are, and so it should be understood and used in a way that's economically sound and compatible with human nature, rather than interfering with it by what seems to be compassionate. Okay, so here's this idea of welfare economics that the lack of productivity is rewarded, and you say, well, that seems fair. That seems to be a good thing, because we're now letting people relax and not strain themselves, and the only way they can do that, because a person has to produce to be able to have income, to be able to buy what they need. And if you mess with that, then what you say, well, let's not make them work so hard to get what they want. Then what happens is the end result is productivity decreases. And then everybody suffers, including the person that you think you're being good, you're being nice to. So when economic law, disutility of labor is a law, an economic law, when it's violated, then the outcome, even if it's, you know, the politician, whoever's saying that, seems like, oh, they're the friendliest, nicest person, but really they're your enemy, because they're causing all kinds of injustices and suffering down the road out of their either lack of understanding of economics or simple violation of economic law.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Now to my last question, actually, before we see people in the house have any question. In your book, you made mention of moral authority of laissez-faire, the moral authority of the defined economic theory. So can you compare and contrast the two?
Well, you know, laissez-faire is really the way the economy, I mean, is allowing the economy to work, the way it's providentially made to work. And over the years and centuries, it's been attacked, and it's been attacked for many reasons. And so what's happened basically is laissez-faire has an argument that would be put forward in a discussion about what's the best way for the economy to run, what makes the economy work best. And you know, the More Than Laissez-faire is an intellectual argument. It basically talks about, you know, if you keep your hands off of it, then it'll work the way it's supposed to. And I think that at the origin of laissez-faire does have this concept of providence behind it. You know, that the invisible hand, that's not, it's a metaphor, but it's a metaphor of something controlling it outside of human domain. But then the humans, the contrary point of view is that, well, humans are intelligent. They should be able, they'll know what's best. They should just change it to, you know, to make it work better. And so there's this argument between them about this, basically the intelligent approach to economics. Whereas the divine economy theory adds another element. It's not much different than laissez-faire at its very basic purpose, origin and intent, but it makes it very clear that the equilibrium force that's there is beyond our comprehension. It is a gift. And you know, I'm not trying to say that a person who's atheist can't understand economics better by learning divine economy theory. But at the same time, God is the source of that providence. Just like if you look into the universe and you see that the galaxies are so monumental, I mean, beyond our comprehension. And I was talking to a person the other day, he was talking about it would take like hundreds of thousand years at the speed of light to get across the Milky Way galaxy. And yet the Milky Way galaxy is only one tiny little galaxy compared to all the other galaxies. I mean, the creation is way, way, way beyond our comprehension. And what we have is we have this same kind of power and beauty and magnificence in the economy. And we have no moral authority. There's no moral authority for us to mess with it, because it's way beyond our comprehension, and it's way more beautiful and powerful than we can ever pretend to grasp. And those people who say that they know what's best, they're lying. They're either lying to themselves and they're lying to you, because and here's the other thing: Austrian economics and classical liberalism, the foundation of this whole approach is the methodology of subjectivism. In other words, it recognizes that humans are subjective. And humans are subjective. In other words, I don't know you. You don't know me. There's no way I can decide things for you. I mean, I can if I was going to impose it on you, but that's not what you would want. If you were choosing yourself, you'd be choosing something different. And so, again, with liberty, we're talking about liberty. We're granted liberty. That's part of us. And we're subjective. We make our choices. We learn and we go, and we're unique individuals. And there's no way anyone else can know exactly what's good for you. And so that's like an analogy to the fact that the universe is far beyond our comprehension. All of these other human beings on the planet are far beyond our comprehension. So for us to pretend that we can organize the world on our little pitiful understanding is completely erroneous. And it has no moral authority. And if laissez-faire isn't strong enough to help them understand that they have no moral authority, the divine economy theory makes it clear that they have no moral authority to intervene in the economy. I can't hear you. Leon. There you go.
Thank you very much for that, Bruce.
You're welcome.
I muted myself because I was hearing some kind of background noise. Okay, so it's very nice hearing from you about your book.
Thank you.
More Than Laissez-faire. We've learned some things. I think I'll have to read that book again. So actually, now the one that was I've heard from you now.
I learn everything. Every time I read it, I learn more. So I mean, it came to me. I developed it, but it's something you can learn from continually. I mean, I do all the time, every time I read it. So.
All right, thank you very much. I know your books are on sale, but if with your permission, I will want to share with the people on this call right now. I think that is okay.
Sure.
Okay. I think our audience are hearing that people on this call right now want to share More Than Laissez-faire with them. Every other person, if you're watching this for the first time, this is the Liberty Show, and what we do is we try to do our best to make sure that we put the song or the gospel of freedom into the mouth of every individual, at least in our local continent first, it is Africa, and to the world at large. And this is how it started. The Liberty Show is a subset of the Face of Liberty International, a think tank that is actually made and brought together in order to preach their ideas of liberty through media and entertainment. The on-tap channel that we can actually reach more people, and with that we can get into the most distant part of Africa and the world as well. Fine, this show cannot work without the sponsorship and the support of you, generous donors and supporters. But we still need more people to actually support this show. You can do that either by subscribing to our channel on YouTube, The Liberty Show with Leon. And apart from that, follow us on our social media platforms. It's at Liberty Face International. Liberty Face INTL. That is our handle across social media. Please subscribe to our channel, follow us on all our social media channels, and please, we need more donation, we need more investors, we need more sponsors for this show to reach more people all around the world, because we want to make sure that everything we do gets to the people we want it to get to. So please, go onto our website at www.faceoflibertyafrica.org. There is a portion where you can actually donate, and you can be rest assured every donation you make goes to the good cause of advancing liberty in Africa. Thank you very much, Bruce, for coming on today, and thank you very much to every other person here on this show. Glenn, thank you so very much. Ms. Grace, thank you. Mr. John Mugabe, thank you very much for being here. Bruce Mugabe is the convener of ALID in Uganda, and he's doing a very good and tremendous work in Uganda as well as we are doing in Nigeria. We are all following the same straight-to-nation. We preach the ideas of liberty to more people in Africa. As I told you before, Mr. Bayanle happens to be like a backbone for this organization, the Face of Liberty Africa. We've been working together hand in hand to make sure that things actually work fine. And Mr. Glenn has been a very good father, mentor to us right from the beginning. So
you guys are
thank you very much. I don't think anybody has. Do anybody have any question for Mr. Bruce before we call it a day on the show today?
I just mentioned that one of the things I'm doing right now is I'm making all the books to audio books. I have a Facebook Live, and so I'm actually in chapter 4 of More Than Laissez-faire right now.
That's good. That's very good. Okay, please, for screenshot's sake, I would love all of us to actually activate our video so that I can actually take a screenshot for later on. Thank you, Glenn. I can see your face already. Mr. Brian, Miss Grace. Okay, thank you. Miss Grace, can you please activate your video so that I can take the screenshot?
Good to see you guys.
Okay. All right. Let's go now. Let me take the shot now. Okay. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Mr. Glenn, you want to say something?
No, it was very good. Very good. Very good interview.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Leon. Really
thank you
very much.
Thank you for your time there, Bruce.
Grateful beyond belief. I'm grateful.
Yeah. We still have 3 books that is still pending. I think we'll find a way to actually go through the remaining 3 books and actually see what we can do about it. Glenn, do you have anything to say?
Okay, I couldn't unmute my mic at first. No, I don't have anything to say. I'm glad you're doing this. There was a little bit of echo from your side there. I guess you saw the note. So maybe you want to see about a different mic or something. I don't know if anything can be done there in the acoustics on Leon's side, but it was very good overall. I thought it was very nice. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so until next week, we are going to bring you another edition of the Liberty Show. Until then, Bye for now.